Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Amelia Proclaims Liberty. Today, I am going to discuss quite a few topics, but first, I just wanted to take a moment to say that as of this recording, today, March 10th, marks 6 months since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And I just want to say this: we will never forget Charlie Kirk. We will never forget the impact he had on our lives. Even though there are so many people that are trying to destroy his name, to discredit him, to claim that he was divisive and that he wasn't a good role model. No matter all of that, we will never forget him. None of that is true. Yes, Charlie Kirk had very specific political and theological beliefs and opinions and stances. But every single person does, and he always communicated those in a professional, caring, and uplifting way. He had such an impact on my generation. In a day when my generation is essentially told to sit down and shut up and let the older people do the thinking, Charlie Kirk saw potential in us. When the world is constantly pushing porn culture and hookup culture and video game culture and partying culture on my generation, Charlie Kirk said, there is something more. Give your life to something that's bigger than yourself. You have an errant worth from your Creator, the God of heaven. Give your life to what He calls you to do. Have purpose, fight for freedom, get married, have kids, live a fulfilling life. Charlie Kirk had such an impact on our lives, and like I said, he did have specific political and ideological views, but he always explained why he believed what he believed. And so my generation will never forget him. No matter how hard people try, they will not silence the voice that he had for so long, even though he may not still be speaking because they assassinated him. His words will not be silenced. We remember them. And we will never forget Charlie Kirk. All right, so there has been a lot going on in the world over the last couple weeks. Am I right? I mean, there's always so much going on, but I can barely keep up with the news every single day, every single hour in our world. It's absolutely insane. There's also been a lot going on in Washington, D.C., like there always is, but there was one specific vote taken last Wednesday, March 4th, that really caused a lot of people, including myself, to be extremely upset. You see, there have been rumors for a long time that a congressman named Tony Gonzalez was having an affair with one of his staffers. And then last year, that staffer committed suicide. Well, this caused Representative Nancy Mace from South Carolina to say, listen, we need to release the Congressional sexual misconduct reports. We need to release those to the public, and get this, we need to release who has used the Congressional Slush Fund to pay off victims. Yes, you heard that right. Did you know that there was a slush fund for members of Congress? I had no idea actually until last week. But yes, there is a fund, and it's more formally called the Office of Congressional Workplace Rights. But included in this is a fund to pay off victims of sexual harassment and assault at the hands of members of Congress. Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, let me ask you this question. Where do you think that money for this fund comes from? You guessed it. It comes from your wallet, your taxes that you pay. You go out and you work a job and you pay that hard-earned money in taxes to the government, and then they use that to pay off victims of sexual assault and harassment so that the public, the media, doesn't find out about it. Can you believe this? I mean, we've known for a long time that our government is shady. But can you believe this? That there is an actual fund for something like this? A taxpayer fund? Well, there is. So Representative Nancy Mace, she said, you know what? We need to release the reports that have been made against members of Congress, and we need to release the names of those who have used this slush fund to pay off victims. Well, it came to a vote last Wednesday, March 4th. And this was the specific motion because people have been getting really confused on the yays or the nays and what they exactly mean, because the vote wasn't just, should we release the list? No, the vote was actually this. On motion to refer, directing the Committee on Ethics to preserve and publicly release records of the committee's review of violations or alleged violations of Clause 9 as it pertains to acts of sexual harassment, and Clause 18 of Rule 23 of the Rules of the House of Representatives. So that's what they're voting on, and the vote is on motion to refer. So basically whether to refer these reports to the Committee on Ethics. So the yays would say, yes, refer it to the committee. The nays are, no, don't refer it to the committee. And specifically, the nays just want it to be publicly released, as I understand it, like right now, without referring it to this committee. 357 members of Congress voted yay, and only 65 voted nay. 1 voted present, and 9 did not vote. So only 65 voted nay, which again, as I understand it, those are the brave men and women that just want these reports to be publicly released immediately without having to refer it to the Committee on Ethics. Now, I am very upset with the members of Congress that voted yay on this, to refer it to the committee. But I do want to give some of them the benefit of the doubt that maybe they read the specific verbiage of what they were voting on and thought to themselves, that sounds good. We're referring it to the House Committee on Ethics, and then they can publicly release it. Some of them may have been thinking that that was the right thing to do. But Representative Anna Paulina Luna gave a statement about this. And in that statement, she specifically said that they know that this motion, or rather this directive to the Committee on Ethics, will die when they receive these reports, and when it's their job to preserve them and to release them, that they're just kind of let it die and they're not going to do anything with it. And she said that a lot of members of Congress know that, and so that's why they voted to refer it to the House Committee. I want to play you this clip of her right now.
Luna.
All right. I support Representative Mace's subpoena here, as well as the amendment to it. And I just think it's really disgusting how this institution protects itself, because y'all just half of them voted to send this stuff to House Ethics, where you know it's going to die. We know that members of Congress are using taxpayer dollars to pay off sexual harassment. We just had a member of Congress literally sexually harass a woman that then lit herself on fire, and you guys all protected him. You guys all protected my own side, your side. And so if you guys want to talk about victims, if you want to go out and virtue signal, and then you guys are going to kill her stuff on the floor and then try to pass it, yeah, of course, we should subpoena all of this stuff. But just, I'm not going to sit here and play games. I think it's a complete fraud. I think that's why the American people hate us. I think the midterms are coming up, and everyone should go on record for this. And I hope that members are exposed for this. I hope it goes back, I think, to the 70s, because it's wrong that it's happening. It's wrong that we cover up for it. It's wrong that we can't censor our own side because people are busy making deals because you guys don't want to censor your side. It's a deal that's been cut, and people hate us for it. So yeah, I support it.
Thank you, Representative.
Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs.
So again, what she said raises a lot of concern. Do members of Congress think and assume that it's going to die in the committee, so that's why they voted this way? I don't think it's possible for us to know why they voted this way, but it is extremely upsetting. I guarantee that a lot of these members of Congress, and by the way, from both parties, I guarantee many of them are guilty of sexual harassment and assault. I guarantee many of them have dipped into that slush fund, and that's probably why they don't want it to be publicly released. They want it to go to a committee to potentially die if what Representative Luna is saying is accurate. But I'm not going to accuse all of them, all 357 of them that voted this way, of being guilty, of having reports filed against them, of dipping into the slush fund. Maybe some of them want to protect friends and colleagues. That is still not a good reason. That is still wrong. You're going to protect abusers. You're going to protect those that are using taxpayer money to pay off victims. Maybe some of them voted this way because they want to protect their party. Maybe they know or they assume that there are members of their party on those reports, in that list of people that have used those funds. So they want to protect their party. They assume that releasing this list will be a betrayal of their party. That is not a good reason at all, because blind party loyalty is a very dangerous thing. That's what the Nazis did. They had blind allegiance to the Nazi party. Now, I'm not equating them to the Nazis. I'm just saying you cannot be blindly loyal to your party, that you are willing to do anything to be loyal to them. So if that was their reasoning, that wasn't a good enough reason. Maybe some of these members of Congress wanted to be gracious and forgiving to their colleagues that may be involved or have been caught up in this or been using the slush fund. Maybe they're trying to be gracious. That still is not a good enough reason. You see, this raises an even deeper issue, and that is this. Our government was founded as a constitutional republic, which means that we have a constitution that governs us, that is the supreme law of the land. And we elect representatives to go to our seat of government and represent us there. We can't all travel to Washington, D.C. and vote on an issue. That's extremely unrealistic. And so our founding fathers set up a system in where each district, each region elects someone to go to the government and represent us. But many times, our government officials, our elected officials, forget that they are there to represent us, we the people. They forget that our government was established of the people, by the people, and for the people. They forget that the first three words of our Constitution say, we the people. They are here to represent us. They get their power from us. And so as the foundation of this nation, we the people deserve to know who is representing us. We deserve to know what they are up to. If they are involved in crimes and unethical behavior, we deserve to know. And we the people deserve to know what our hard-earned taxpayer dollars are going towards. And we do not want them to go to a slush fund that members of Congress use to pay off victims of their sexual harassment and assault. That is wrong. So that is what this boils down to. No matter what these members of Congress's reasons for voting to refer this instead of just voting to publicly release these documents, whatever their reason, it is not good enough because we, the people, demand transparency. Now, I understand that there may be different reasonings for why they voted this way. Maybe they may be thinking that some of these accusations in these reports are not true, or they have not been properly investigated. And so if you automatically release them, that is going to cast these members of Congress in a bad light when maybe it's not true. And I do understand that, but listen. We have been living under decades, if not longer, of a government that is not transparent. Half the time, we don't know what's really going on in Washington, D.C. And we know that so many members of Congress, so many elected officials, so many bureaucrats have abused their power and forgotten that they represent we the people. They get their power from us. They've kind of gone rogue in Washington, D.C. and just kind of gotten involved in the swamp. I believe that there is a way to rightfully go about this, to investigate these things. Of course, not to let innocent members of Congress be falsely accused. But the time for this all being brushed under the rug, being sent to committees to die, is over. There is a better way to do all of this. And so I am extremely disappointed in the members of Congress that voted against this. Or rather, voted for this, voted to refer it, voted against just immediately publicly releasing these things. I'm very disappointed. Some of my favorite members of Congress, ones that I really respected and looked up to, that have been fighting for truth and conservative values in Washington, D.C., even voted the wrong way on this. And I'm extremely disappointed. And again, the reasoning may be different for everyone. But the American people are done with this. We, the people, demand transparency. We don't want this to be referred to an ethics committee who, by the way, the staff director and chief counsel of this committee is someone that has many accusations against him. Now, again, I don't know if they've been proven true, but there are a lot of accusations against him. He even has a DUI, which, by the way, he was charged for, a DUI that he crashed into a house in Pennsylvania, into the front porch. He could have killed someone. He was actually removed from being the staff director and chief counsel for a little while after that. But obviously, he was reinstated because he is the current staff director and chief counsel of this House Committee on Ethics. And again, everyone deserves a second chance, but you need to choose someone that has a long moral and ethical track record to be in a position like this. And so, no, I don't have a lot of faith that this is going to be handled properly in this committee. And if you remember that video I played it for you of Representative Anna Paulina Luna, she alluded to the same thing, that even she believes that this is going to this committee to die, that they're not actually going to do anything about it. You know, one of the things in the list of grievances that our founding fathers wrote in the Declaration of Independence when they were 13 colonies declaring their independence from Great Britain because the Parliament and the King had constantly treated them in such a wrongful way. One of the list of grievances that they gave for why they were splitting off from England was taxation without representation. And sometimes I feel like that's what we get in our country. Now, I want to say something. I love America. And I know that we have so many bulldogs in our government, in our local governments, our state governments, even our federal government. We have a lot of bulldogs who really care about our country. They care about us. And many of them care about the Lord Jesus Christ. We have President Trump, who, by the way, is doing so many amazing things. But our government as a whole does not represent us the way that we deserve to have. Because like I said, they get their power from we the people. That is the way the Constitution is set up. And sometimes I feel like we have taxation without representation. We're taxed to the hilt. But oftentimes, our representatives don't listen to us. But instead, they use our taxpayer money. They're more than happy to use our taxpayer money to pay off victims. But they forget that they owe us explanations. They're accountable to us. And I believe every member of Congress that voted to refer this to the committee instead of just taking decisive action on it needs to be required to explain to us why. No matter what their reason, they need to explain to us. Because we elected them, they represented us in Washington, D.C., and we deserve to know. You know, I've been thinking a lot lately about how our founding fathers were public servants. And they wanted politicians in this nation to be public servants. Many of them ran for office when our country was finally established. Many of them ran for office not because they necessarily wanted to, but because they had a duty to their nation. They knew that they had set up a republic where the people would elect individuals to represent them, and they knew that they owed it to their country to serve their time as a government official. And so they ran for office anyway. Like George Washington. There were times he didn't want to be president, but he did it because he loved his country, and because the people wanted him, and because he owed it to this beautiful nation that we live in. But it seems like it's become very trendy over the last probably couple centuries for individuals to run for office because they want to make a name for themselves, because they want to have power, because they want to climb the ladder, not necessarily because they want to help people. And I know we can all struggle with that at different times in our lives, but if that is your driving force behind being an elected official, you probably should not be an elected official, because you will do anything for power, you will do anything for fame, you will do anything for a position, and that is the last person that needs to be a politician, or that needs to be in politics, needs to be a leader in our country, in our states, and in our cities. We need more public servants like our founding fathers, like George Washington, that say, you know what, I don't really want to run for office. I don't really want to be in a position of power, but I will, because I care about our country. I care about my state. I care about my city. I care about people, my friends, my family, those in my community. I care about them. I care about freedom. I care about righteousness. And I want to preserve freedom for future generations. I want to protect the innocent, and I want to do what's right. We need more people like that. That is why U.S. presidents are only president for the max of 2 terms. And I also support term limits for members of Congress, because we have seen so many members of Congress have abused their power and their position for so many years, and some of them never stop running for office. And you know what I've experienced is so many individuals run for office, they get elected, and then they spend their whole term kind of on eggshells, not wanting to do anything that the left may deem too radical, because they want to get elected again, or they want to get elected to a higher office. And so they hold back. They don't ban abortion. They don't protect children. They allow a little bit of socialist policies. They don't want to be seen as radical because they want to be elected again and again and again. So I support term limits for Congress, for all offices. And I think if there's a government official, an elected official listening to this, and you are someone who has held back on what you know to be right and true because you want to get elected in the future, please reconsider if that is what God has for you. But none of us are perfect. We are all flawed. And so just because you may be struggling with that doesn't mean you're not supposed to run for office. But I beg of you to take a step back, to check your heart, and to let the Lord change your heart, to give you the right motives for running for office, because we need More than ever, we need public servants. We don't need more politicians. We need public servants who run for office not because they really want to, but because they need to. Cut and dry. That is what we need. You know, one of the most treasured freedoms in our nation and in our Constitution is in the First Amendment, and that is the freedom of speech. I think we can all agree that the freedom of speech has been attacked relentlessly throughout the whole history of the United States. But over the last several years, it has been attacked more than ever. But I'm witnessing a very concerning trend among Democrats and Republicans, the right and the left, Christians and non-Christians. It seems that no one can really define what true freedom of speech is anymore. We have people saying anything and everything they want. Accusations, defamation, propaganda, making all of these claims, saying all of these things, whether it's true or not, and claiming that they have the freedom of speech to do so, which they do. They do have the freedom of speech. Now, when it comes to defamation and slander, there is a certain legality of that to where they could be sued for defaming someone's name, for just slandering them, telling lies about them. You can be sued for that. But to a certain extent, you do have the freedom of speech to say whatever you want. That is one of the bulwarks of our nation that our founding fathers wanted us to have, because the history of mankind has been a history of governments specifically trying to stifle freedom of speech, any ideas that they don't agree with. But like I said, people will say anything they want, whether it's true, whether it's false, and they claim they have the freedom of speech to do so. But I want you to watch, and I want you to think about if you've ever experienced this. The moment someone comes forward and uses their freedom of speech to call that person out, or to ask questions of them, to call out inconsistencies, to call out their hypocrisy, those same individuals that say whatever they want under the guise of freedom of speech will go hide and cower in the corner and cry and say that their freedom of speech has been taken away and that people are trying to cancel them. When in reality, that other person is just using their freedom of speech to call that person out. Freedom of speech goes two ways. And so many people, it seems, don't realize that. And I know I've talked about these individuals before, and I wasn't even going to really bring up their names, but I just really have to. We've seen this a lot among people that for a long time we thought were conservative, right-wing Republicans. All of a sudden, they're doing this. People like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Megyn Kelly, all these individuals get on their podcasts, get on social media, and they say anything and everything they want. They make all kinds of claims, accusations. They just go on and on about things that haven't been proven to be true, that there's no real reason to necessarily believe, or maybe even things that have been proven to be false. But they say them anyway. They claim them anyway. But the second someone stands up and says, hey, Tucker, hey, Candace, hey, Megyn, what about this? Or where did you get that information? Or what about this fact, this verified fact that contradicts what you are saying? Or what is your motive for saying this? They melt and they claim that their freedom of speech has been taken away and that people are trying to cancel them. When no, people are using their freedom of speech to also just ask questions, to also hold them accountable. People like Tucker and Candace and Megyn, literally one of their claims, one of their themes of their podcast are just ask questions. But the second someone asks questions of them, they plead the First Amendment per se. Like I said before, freedom of speech goes two ways. And actually, when the Constitution talks about freedom of speech, it's talking about the government. It cannot infringe on your free speech. The government cannot tell you what you can and cannot say. It doesn't say the private citizens can't ask you questions or can't call you out. Because believe it or not, other people have freedom of speech rights as well. And so as you go throughout everyday life in the United States, you are going to see this more and more, and especially on social media, especially in podcasts and other arenas, you are going to see people constantly claiming that others are taking away their freedom of speech. And really what it is that people like Tucker and Candace and Megan, they just don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to have to provide proof for anything. That's what it comes down to. Never forget that you have freedom of speech. Never let anyone take that away from you, whether that person's on the right, whether that person's on the left, whether that person's a liberal, whether that person claims to be conservative. Never let anyone take away your freedom of speech, but use your freedom of speech in a responsible manner. The Bible says, to whom much is given, much is required. We have been given freedom by God, and that freedom has been guaranteed to us in the U.S. Constitution. To whom much is given, much is required. Do not abuse freedom of speech. Make sure everything that you say that comes through your lips is truthful and is what you should say. But if you are doing that, if you will be a check on yourself, that will guarantee that that freedom will be preserved for future generations. You know, George Washington in his farewell address talked about this. How that our form of government will only work for virtuous people. And I'm paraphrasing that. But he talked about how it will only work for virtuous people. You see, we are considered self-governed because, like I said earlier, the government gets its power from we, the people. So we are considered self-governing. So we have to take responsibility to self-govern properly. And if we ever stop doing it properly, a tyrant is going to come in and take control over us. You see, when people get away from controlling themselves, they try to control everyone else, and they can't be held accountable by anyone. It's a dangerous spot we're living in where these simple freedoms are being confused. No one knows how to define them, and people are just constantly infringing on other people's rights. I'm also seeing this all over social media, this trend that apparently no one can hold anyone accountable for anything. And I'm seeing this especially, and I've talked about this before, in the Groyper movement. If you know anything about the Groyper movement, the Groypers are followers and fans of Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is this podcaster, commentator. He's 27 years old. He claims to be conservative. He claims to be right-wing, but he literally goes around talking about how cool Hitler was, how he admires Stalin, how, women were only made for sex, that everything is the fault of Israel. You've heard those kinds of people, even if you don't know who Nick Fuentes is. But the things that he says are just so extremely disgusting. That is not conservative. That is not right-wing, but he claims to be conservative. And so unfortunately, he has a really big following, specifically among Gen Z young men, but some young women as well, but a lot of young men. And so they're kind of infiltrating the real conservative movement. And there are people specifically on social media that are raising alarm bells, that are sounding the alarm bells, like this individual, they're followers, avid fans of Nick Fuentes, they've posted this and that on their social media accounts. Maybe they shouldn't be in leadership positions in the conservative movement, or maybe they shouldn't be elected to this elected office. Like, this person has a concerning social media account. They have very concerning ideologies and beliefs. When people raise alarm bells like that, they're accused of trying to cancel that person, of disagreeing with someone because they disagree with them politically. And listen up. We've gotten to the point, and this kind of goes with what I was just saying, we've gotten to this point where we all of a sudden can't hold anyone accountable for anything. We can't ask anyone questions. We can't issue warnings anymore because that's canceling, or that's taking away someone's freedom of speech. I mean, that person can literally say the most grotesque things about Jewish people, and somehow we're not supposed to say anything because that's canceling them. Conservatives, listen up. There are some things that are worth speaking up about. There are some things that are worth giving a warning about. And this new trend in the conservative movement that says we can't call anyone out that's in the conservative movement because that will be betraying the conservative movement and that will be canceling them, that is not legitimate. That's tribalistic and that's cultish. And that behavior does not belong in the conservative movement and in the Republican Party. And the confusion that's coming from all of this is what the enemy wants, because I believe a lot of these individuals, like Nick Fuentes, like Candace Owens, like Tucker Carlson, like Megyn Kelly, like all of their followers that we're having these discussions about that are infiltrating the conservative movement, I don't believe any of them are actually conservative. Or at least many of them, I don't believe are conservative. I believe many of them are actual liberal Marxists who are infiltrating the conservative movement to cause a divide and confusion. And a lot of people are letting them. Now, I believe there are a lot of great individuals that probably don't see all this online, don't even know this divide is going on, and have their head on straight. And for that, I am glad. But we as conservatives and we as Republicans need to be on high alert. Because if we think that the left is not going to infiltrate us using every method, we are fooling ourselves. The Soviet Union, back during the Cold War, would try to get into the United States by infiltrating with propaganda. And that is what we are seeing. And the definition of propaganda that I read that I thought was so incredible is this. Propaganda is this systematic, deliberate dissemination of information, rumors, or ideas, often biased, misleading, or emotionally charged, to influence public opinion, promote a specific cause, or damage an opponent. And that is what we are seeing. We are seeing all these claims without any fact behind them. People that don't want to prove themselves about anything. And I'm seeing this most of all about the nation of Israel. And I talked about this in my last episode, but I am so sick and tired of hearing that everything is the fault of Israel. That is ludicrous. Now, do I believe that Israel is a perfect, flawless nation? Of course not. They're a nation made up of human beings with fallen natures, just like any nation. They have corruption. I'm sure they have a deep state, just like any nation, just like the United States, by the way. But Israel cannot be guilty for every single problem and evil in the whole world. People are literally blaming them for everything, small and big. It is ludicrous. But the moment someone gets on there to ask questions, the person that's blaming Israel for everything just loses it and says their freedom of speech is being threatened. This is not using your freedom responsibly. And this is giving way to propaganda like the Soviet Union did during the Cold War. We need to wake up as a conservative movement. We need to wake up as a Republican Party. We are being infiltrated, and our nation will crumble from within if we do not, number one, if our even Republican government officials do not represent us properly in transparency and righteousness and ethics, and if number two, we do not realize the propaganda that we are being played and using our freedom of speech responsibly. I know that I've been extremely heated in a lot of these conversations today, but it's because I love America. I love our nation so much. When I see Old Glory waving in the wind, when I see her red, white, and blue colors, when I hear the national anthem, it makes my heart swell with pride and joy and love for my nation. Our nation has such a rich history. Our founding is just so beautiful, full of the miracles of God. I encourage you to study the founding of our nation. I would suggest watching or reading anything from Wall Builders and David and Tim Barton. They have amazing video series and books that will make you love our nation if you don't already. And so when I'm seeing all of these really disturbing things that our government is doing, when I'm seeing all these really disturbing trends that are infiltrating the conservative movement, it literally breaks my heart. Like, I literally think about these things all of the time. I have shed tears over these things because I don't want to see my future children be raised in a world, in a nation, that they don't know what freedom of speech is, that they don't know what freedom of religion is, that they don't know what freedom of the press is. I don't want them to live in that kind of nation. I want them to live in the nation that I have, one of freedom, where I can go to church, I can worship Jesus in freedom without fear of being arrested and killed, where I can voice my political beliefs and opinions and my faith without fear of legal retribution. I want them to be raised in that nation, and I'm seeing the writing on the wall. Dangerous things are happening. And I would be remiss if I was silent and if I didn't say anything about them. And so everything I've said today comes from a place of concern and love for our nation. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Amelia Proclaims Liberty. Please send this to a friend that you think needs to hear something specific in this episode. Maybe even share it on social media. Please subscribe on the platform of your choice and give me a rating and review that will encourage other people to listen. Until next time, thank you so much for listening to Amelia Proclaims Liberty.